Hi guys, I'm Matt Schlicht with Zapchain, and I'm here with Adam Draper, the founder of Boost VC, which is pretty much the most prominent Bitcoin investment firm.
Some people have said the Harvard of Bitcoin. I'm,
Just throwing that out there.
just throwing it out there. Just wanted to say that.
So if you guys want to go to the Harvard of Bitcoin, Adam's the guy to talk to. But so welcome to the Bitcoin course. Thank you for helping us educate people about Bitcoin, get people excited. As you probably know, Bitcoin can be pretty confusing.
Super confusing.
Super confusing. And so all these people have probably decided it's confusing, but for some reason they've also decided they're going to watch us talk and explain it to them.
Perfect.
So tell us a little bit about Boost VC.
Okay, so actually, I think what I'll do is I'll tell you a bit about how I got into Bitcoin, and then also how I started Boost, because it sort of goes in sequence. So that makes sense.
I'm okay with that.
If you're okay with that. So actually, I have a very unique entry into Bitcoin. I was fortunate enough to reach out to a guy named Brian Armstrong, who's CEO of Coinbase, when he was fundraising for his seed round. And I sort of read the description of his company, and I said, "Oh, that's really interesting. This magic money thing, I don't understand what digital currency is." That's basically what I was thinking.
What was the description of Coinbase? Just because someone might not
It was marketplace for digital currency. I believe that's what it
magic
said.
money.
That's what it said. So in my mind, I was thinking, well, magic money or like credit card points. Like those were the two things that passed through my head. And I was like, well, those are both sort of big ideas, but I don't really understand it yet. So why don't I reach out to them?
Right.
And so I emailed, basically, here's a trick. When a company starts, normally the founder picks their first name and then at their domain name as their email address. So if you ever want to reach a CEO or a founder of a company, just do that.
I don't know why people don't understand that. They always think it's like he
super
probably has some like
complicated.
secret email that like nobody can reach him in.
Yeah. And so that was my I reached out to Brian at Coinbase.com and I said, "Hey, I would love to meet. You're raising money. I would love to hear more about what you're doing." And so we met in downtown Mountain View, and and he pitched me this concept of Bitcoin, and I also so he didn't pitch me his company yet. I said the one thing that he didn't want said, which was, "So what's Bitcoin?" And he felt like it was sort of like he was super disheartened because he had to pitch so many people on what Bitcoin was. So Bitcoin companies today have it easy because most investors know what Bitcoin is now. 2 years ago, Brian had to go through and explain what Bitcoin was to every single investor. And so you can thank him for laying the groundwork for everyone else.
When he met with you, he was probably like, he woke up, he was probably like, maybe today.
Maybe today is the day that I don't have to explain what Bitcoin is.
And then he was really excited, and then you're like, so what is it? He's like, oh.
God, not another one. That's sort of what I felt like went through his head. I'll ask him someday whether or not that's what went through his head. But he started explaining Bitcoin to me, and the two things I grabbed from Bitcoin were, that it was this. So if 2008 proved anything to me, was that we're a global economy, but there's no currency that ties the world together. If something bad happens to any country, especially the United States, like it happens to all the countries. But there's no currency that actually ties all of that into like one big web. And I felt that was a very powerful concept. Like traveling the world without having to cash out of a currency was a very powerful thing. The other thing that I really got excited about was the fact that it had already had a crash in 2011. The price of Bitcoin had gone from $30 to $0. And the reason that I was excited that it had crashed is because I felt it mitigated a lot of the risk. When I was talking to Brian, the price of Bitcoin was already at about $15 per Bitcoin, which proved to me that there was a passionate community around this thing that willed it into existence.
Right.
And so that's the thing that really captivated me, was that the community around Bitcoin was so strong. And so Brian, he went through what Bitcoin was, and I was like, okay, I get the basic premise. I knew nothing.
You said that?
Yeah, I was paraphrasing. I get it.
I get it. It's easy.
Yeah, super simple. No, those were literally the only two things that I really understood about Bitcoin. Like later on, I found out about this thing called the blockchain, and that was a rabbit hole in itself, and so that was interesting. But I talked to him, and then he was pitching his business on top of it, and he was saying how like he wanted merchants to be able to accept Bitcoin through being able to accept Bitcoin as payment.
Right.
But what he found was that no one was able to buy Bitcoin in order to buy things with Bitcoin.
Right.
And so he was like one step ahead. And so he said, so I created this really, really easy way for people to be able to buy Bitcoin. And he created the user interface that most people use today. Millions of wallets have been created on Coinbase today to be able to purchase Bitcoin. So he's a broker of Bitcoin today. And he also is doing merchant services. And he, since my investment, has, I believe I was one of two individuals in that, maybe three individuals in that round, and Funders Club funded some of it. And then after us, about 6 months after us, Union Square Ventures put in $5 million with Ribbit Capital, a couple other people, and then Andreessen Horowitz put in about 25. So they've raised about $32 million. They're definitely one of the leaders in the space, the leader from my perspective, doing a really important thing, just sort of making Bitcoin more legitimate. It makes it like, when you look at Coinbase's brand, it feels more like a financial service company than sort of there's this negative connotation around Bitcoin that they're trying to wipe away.
Well, I mean, and over the past 9 months, Coinbase has been pretty focused on getting really big brand name merchants to start accepting Bitcoin.
Completely.
So like Dell, DirecTV, Overstock, and I mean, it's almost the best marketing campaign Bitcoin has ever had, because now you hear Bitcoin, and you're like, oh, Dell, I can buy a Dell with Bitcoin. I mean,
I can buy like a mattress on Overstock.com.
Yeah.
So like they have everything from computers to, the beddings.
Right.
Yeah.
Wide range of things.
Yeah, wide range of stuff you can buy online with Bitcoin through Coinbase.
So you decided to invest in Coinbase immediately when you were meeting with him and he explained to you what Bitcoin was?
So no. So what happened was I said, this is really interesting, but I'm going to, I need to do some research. Because I was not an expert on Bitcoin. Obviously, that was my first conversation about Bitcoin in total.
So were you thinking, like, this could be cool? Like, you walked away from the coffee shop in Mountain View, and what are you thinking? You're like, I just met with this bald guy, and he pitched me Coinbase, and it sounds like magic money.
So I was thinking, okay, so Brian pitched, at first he told me his background, and his background was super impressive. He had tried to start a couple companies. He had worked at Airbnb, and one of the main thing that really drew me to basically walking away with a really positive, like, this might work thought process was, here's this, he was a solo founder, super talented engineer and super talented just entrepreneur. And he was about to dedicate the next 10 years of his life towards building a company around a market size that was only $200 million in total. Like, that was the entire market of Bitcoin.
Which by the way, for everyone,
that's a very small market.
It's really tiny.
That's a very tiny market.
Usually it's like, and the market's $100 billion or $500 billion.
Yeah, huge billions, trillions. And so I was sort of thinking, why is this super talented individual trying to start a company in this industry that's so small unless he knows something we don't? And he was so passionate about it that made me walk away with the idea that I did not commit to him in that meeting. And rarely do investors commit in the first meeting. But I said, okay, I need to do some due diligence. I need to talk to different people. And so I asked him for a couple references. He sent me to a couple people who were sort of passionate about the space. And I met with all of them. I met with, I think, 3 or 4 people in order to do my sort of diligence on Coinbase and Bitcoin in general. I was like, and all of them were super passionate engineers. Like, all of them were super passionate engineers, and they all spoke way above my head. Like, I understood about 30% of what they were saying about the blockchain, about Bitcoin, about everything. And so,
which probably made you like slightly mad, but also like super excited.
But it was like they were so passionate about it and so excited by, like, you always feed off of passionate people. Like, you get the energy, you feel the energy, and I was like, I think there's something here, and I think Brian's going to do something, even whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's whatever the thing is. And so then during my due diligence process, about 3 weeks later, most of the most important decisions in the world are decided on the toilet. And so I was actually in my bathroom, and I had this stack of Economist magazines that were right next to my toilet. By the way, this is a story I've never told publicly, and now I know that this is going to be going out to
millions of people are watching
probably a lot
right
of people right now.
Yeah.
And so I was reading this magazine that had been on my next to my toilet for about probably a year and a half, 2 years. It was like a 2011 Economist magazine, and I'd read it 15 times.
That day?
No, 15 times in general.
Oh, okay.
Like I had gone through all these Economist magazines multiple times, and like I was reading through it this day, and I was in the process of sort of doing due diligence, and I was like, am I in? Am I out? And so then I'm reading through this magazine, and there's this huge write-up on Bitcoin, like an enormous write-up on Bitcoin, and it was when the price of Bitcoin had jumped up to about $20 per Bitcoin. So there's about at that time, it was probably like $100 million worth of Bitcoin, based off of how many coins had been released. And so I was reading this article, and I was like, this is so interesting that like it had captivated an audience of viewership before, like a year and a half before I had even stumbled upon it. And so that right after that, basically, so I had met Brian. I said that was one of my yeses. I was sort of like, there's something interesting in this Bitcoin space, so that was sort of like I'm okay with that. I'd met with all of these engineers. I was like, this is really exciting. And then my fourth yes was like this magazine that had Bitcoin in it. And then right after that,
when you got out of the bathroom.
Whenever I got out of the bathroom, right after that, I called Brian and I said, I'm in. And then I explained that entire thought process to him, and I'm sure he was just like, thanks for the money. But he's like the nicest guy. He still receives feedback awesomely well. He's still, he's just so humble and awesome. He's such a great leader.
He probably got off the phone and he was like, next to like someone was like, Adam just called me and said he's in, but he like just got out of the bathroom.
Told me the story about the bathroom. Yeah. So it's sort of a funny.
You're like the bathroom
story.
investor.
Yeah. So that was my first entry into Bitcoin.
Right.
Okay, which was really, really fun, really, really exciting. What was really interesting was 2 weeks later I was starting Boost, which is the best, the Harvard of Bitcoin startups, and also other types of startups. But
less like Harvard. I mean, Harvard you have to pay a lot of money to.
Yes, so we actually provide housing, office space, and we invest money. So we actually pay you to start your companies and learn.
It's like the opposite.
It's like the opposite of Harvard. Actually, it's more like starting a company, and we help you do that
with money.
With money, and we give you
network.
And housing and a network, and it's really fun because we surround you with passionate people who can help you build your company.
Right.
And so we were starting literally 2 weeks after I met with Brian, and for our first session, when you're starting an accelerator, it was really about keeping the wheels on the bus and making sure that all the wheels and the doors and everything didn't just fall off. So we just wanted to keep everything on while this thing was driving at 60 miles per hour. And so we started a session that was it was a broad session. We weren't focused on any particular industry.
What is a session?
Sorry, a session, it's 3 months where we do provide housing and office space, and we accept a certain number of companies. We've worked our way up to about 26, but in our first session it was 7 companies. And during that session, we bring in weekly speakers, a speaker once a week, who can sort of add value of knowledge and a network because they're very smart and they've done cool things.
Right. And so you give each of the companies investment too.
And we give each of the companies investment. So we invest between $10,000 and $20,000 for about 6% of the company. And so then we also bring in mentors who help give feedback to each of the companies throughout the program.